Episode 6 of Ghost in the Shell was absolutely incredible and serves as the original source for the 1995 spider tank fight in the film's climax. But what you didn't know is what actually happened in the original manga was almost totally different and features a much larger and more dramatic and introspective approach. Episode 6 kicks off with one hell of a confusing exchange of dialogue, but to break it down, Toru Soma is getting a procedure done to specifically install new micromachines into his brain. There was a lot of extra details that are fascinating to me, such as how once micromachines are implanted, for the most part, they are stuck into your brain and cannot be taken out. Plus, this is what allows things like HUDs or HUDs, like how we see in video games, to be imprinted onto a user's vision amongst other things. In this case, things such as feelings and memories use things such as speech as they are more complex to convey. And to deal with the pain, there is a synthetic implant for painkillers that dissolves, which by then will allow Soma to sync up with the net even though he doesn't need to. While dense and full of big words, it's mostly just explaining the process of micromachine integration into the brain and how it functions in a real-world scenario. This is one of the aspects of humanity's future I'm probably most excited for and fascinated by, if it is to come true. Not the downsides, of course. And to be honest, I can live without the implants, but being able to augment things like your visions with HUDs or nanomachines is a feature that would benefit so many people. Just as an example, I read way too many books, manga, and I am currently balls deep in a Mass Effect 2 replay, so my poor eyes are working overtime. The episode then starts off with a bang, literally. The Major has been going steady with a guy for about 6-7 months now with a guy from Section 1. There is some really nice dialogue here that will pop up later on. The Major's man seems to think that the Major thinks Section 1 plays things too fast and loose. It's also important to note that the Major has a meeting today with an official, and so she's looking spiffy with a new look. Not only do we get the classic suit for the Major, which is always nice to see in every adaptation, but we also see that she's changed her hair color, something a bit new. While we can only speculate, my guess is that this is not her same blue hair, but rather she changes out her hair like they're implants, which is such a small detail that the show never even mentions, which is why I like Get so much. It doesn't mind leaving things for you to figure out through context and subcontext. Turns out Mr. Sabita from the 4th floor came over to blow himself up, but not before unloading a blast from a shotgun that rips through the door and the Major's clothing. It's sobering that in this world, Mr. Sabita was simply a manga artist that was hacked into and turned into a bomb to kill the Major. It shows that in a world such as this, any moment can be a person's last and they may never even know it, which plays up the themes of this idea that human consciousness is extremely fragile and fleeting in some aspects. This transitions into Aramaki getting word of the assassination attempt and sends everyone over to make sure that the Major is safe, especially Bato, who is in a panic and very worried about the Major. Now this could be me, but I sense much more romantic tension than, say, I did in the Arise films. Not even saying that there is romantic tension, just that there's a hint of it, which I like. And maybe romance isn't even the word here, but the man that the Major is with even looks like Bato too. Now that could also just be art style, but I get the feeling that if they weren't in this line of work, the Major and Bato probably would really hit it off. They are pretty much brother and sister at the very least. On top of that, I should also mention that it's quite refreshing to see the Major in a romantic relationship anyways. I feel like it adds depth to her character and is an example of how showing a character's romantic side makes them feel more human. Seeing the two interact reminded me that while the Major is this force of nature for good, she's also just a girl at the end of the day and wants to feel things like love and romance. It also contextualizes her relationships in general. Her two girlfriends are more or less nothing serious, and more than anything, they seem to be just close friends. This is likely due to the Major's inability to keep relationships, as later in the episode, Bato sort of teases the Major for going steady with a guy for once, which clearly is a sore spot for the Major, which means that he is right, and that one of the spots lacking in her life is the feeling of romance and love, which is another aspect of this genre that this series tackles pretty well. How does one define love in a world where the hustle is a matter of life, death, or homelessness? No time for love when life is so fleeting and death is so obscured. So there was another aspect of this scene that I think shines a big light on the way Aramaki perceives his world and the job he lives. He lives by this idea that it's better to control a group than to wipe out a group, because being able to control them, you can get even more info on evil groups. The downsides of this, though, is you do have to somewhat placate them and give in to some of their needs and wants. But the overall idea is to root out even bigger evil. This is a recurring theme of this series that I love. Aramaki believes in manipulating and controlling terrorists, Togusa believes in wiping them out immediately, and the Major believes in using them to gain more knowledge. As we see later, Aramaki and the Major pretty much line up more in this regard and complement each other, so much so that Aramaki even tells the Major that he sees her as his daughter. That can further put into perspective for the viewer that Aramaki does all of this out of probably some kind of love for the people like the Major. He doesn't want to see people hurt, but also realizes that people will be hurt, so he chooses to root out the biggest evils to save the largest amount of people. That's the inference that I'm kind of perceiving here. But we learn that this entire thing was set up as revenge by Toru Soma, which at first gave me Fruits Basket flashbacks. I'm rewatching that in my Discord server at the moment, so it's poignant. By the way, you should join my Discord server. The Major knows this because the way it was laid out was exactly how he got 6 of her men before this, which led to her getting him to kill his own 16-year-old son, who tortured said teammates. I guess you could say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. To top it off with a nice cherry, Toru Soma is a pretty big fish here. He is the only terrorist they were never able to kill, the one that got away. Because of this, Aramaki orders the Major to act as bait to get Soma to come out. As Bato is leaving, Togusa tells him that his car has been booby-trapped with explosive, which he then spends the entire episode trying to resolve. By the way, I love this. Check the after-credits scene. There is one for this episode that shows the resolution to this plot point, and let me tell you, well, I don't need to tell you, just watch it. It's fantastic. As the Major gears up and is ready to leave, she has an interesting moment where her man is forced to reveal that he gave Section 1 information of the Major. He was paranoid about her and wanted to run some background checks. This was clearly something that deeply hurt the Major, and she wanted to have a foundation of trust in this relationship. Later in the episode, it's made out to be just a part of the Major's plan, but I suspect not so, as she even puts on her sunglasses to hide her eyes, meaning that we will probably never know outright. But based on the romance plot in this episode, I think it is safe to say that the Major truly does want love and thinks he's a pretty good guy. Another example that she likes him truly is that when they come face to face later in the episode, she could have easily used her throwing knife to take him out. He was pretty much wide open. Instead, she hits him in the shoulder, which is in no way any sort of lethal blow. This plays into the idea that the Major planned this all out to begin with just to get to Soma, which is more or less true, but still proves that the Major likes the man nonetheless, and I like you. So please, subscribe and like the video for more Ghost in the Shell. As we continue, the Major gets tailed, forcing her and Togusa to book it to an abandoned factory where the episode will eventually reach its climax. As they arrive at the factory, the Major tells Togusa that he shouldn't underestimate these people, and that even if they are rookies, they should always pitch as hard as they can. Which is to say, never half-ass something. If you have the power to wipe out an entire group, even if it's overkill, you still do it. This shows the temperament of the Major, that she only would learn through experience. Because if the people they fight don't turn out to be rookies, which is not the case here, then Togusa would be in deep trouble against a spider tank. Another bit of world building is that the factory is overrun by the homeless, showing just how depraved the society is. But as the van arrives, the Major sees this and orders the Fuchikoma to blow up the van, leading to one hell of an entrance for the spider tank from the 95 film, or should I say, from this original source material. It immediately annihilates the Fuchikoma, much to my dismay, and funnily enough, the Fuchikoma's wow. I thought that was cute. Aramaki then gets them over the firepower they need, which is Borma and Paz. The Major is able to suss out this entire thing is being led by a group of people using an organization to help them. The tank fires on them, leading to an incredible action sequence in which the Major is down one arm and has her skin ripped off her endoskeleton. But she's still badass and shows off her advanced body, so their plan is to use their agility and speed and movement, which the tank isn't able to do. Eventually, this leads to a confrontation between Major's boyfriend and the Major, which we discussed before, but the Major relays all of this information that Section 1 is behind this to Aramaki. So Aramaki goes to the Section 1 commander, who at first doesn't care. That is until Aramaki pulls a gun on him to get him to back off. Turns out this entire operation was to figure out who Anaconda was. Soma wanted the information on the Major, so he then gave Section 1 the info they needed on the Benton family's dealer. As this is happening, Soma is blasting away at the Major while their boyfriend orders his team to help Motoko. This then leads to the infamous moment when the spider tank latches onto the Major's head, something that has been replayed basically every adaptation ad infinitum. The difference here is that her boyfriend goes in to try and pry her free as Paz saves the Major. She is then thrown a gun and blasted in the head, telling him that if you hate this world so much, don't ever come back from the other one. This is a sentiment that the Major often expresses throughout all of the adaptations. This idea that if there are people who truly hate this world enough, then they should just leave it all together. The deeper meaning behind this is that the Major is actually trying to make a difference in this world and is dedicating her life to making it better. These terrorists are simply misguided and making the problems of the world much worse. In other words, they are selfish and naive. The Major, on the other hand, seems to take responsibility for the way the world and herself is and chooses to push forward. She would rather dedicate her life trying to fix the world and failing than to add to the chaos because of anger, rage, hell, or some vengeance. It's a job to her second, and it is first a movement she cares deeply for. It's a rather hopeful outlook on the world, which I think is what makes the Major so special as a character. She doesn't believe in giving up, she doesn't care how bad things are. She is all about keeping focus and pushing forward, so yeah, she's my kind of gal. She hates doomers and gloomers, which to me is the antithesis to the way that life is supposed to be lived anyways. But the way this episode ends is delightful. The entire time, this was simply a mission to assassinate Anaconda, which they were successful in doing and proving that bet was a good one. Section 1 truly is incompetent. But the best part of this episode was diving into Motoko's romantic relationships and even how Aramaki views her, which is why I made a video explaining another romantic-centric episode breaking down Aramaki's relationship with Methuselah. Make it a great day or not, the choice is yours.